by Patricia McCormick. The lead character in this book is a self-harming adolescent, roughly around the age of 18, who does not speak at all. And in the first chapter, she describes the mental institution she is in, which is called Sea Pines, and they nicknamed it as Sick Minds. Twice a day, the hospital enforces a group therapy session. They consider it the key part of hospital treatments, and they consider it one of the key parts of being able to overcome certain signs of madness and certain disabilities that someone may have. The issue with group therapy is that not everyone is able to disclose such personal information, like the lead character, who has a nickname ST for silent treatment. She does not speak to anybody. She doesn't tell anyone how she's feeling or what is happening inside. She just stays silent, and she has trouble speaking to anyone. Some people are very good at sharing, but every single person is different, and when in a group, some people may have trouble disclosing their own mental illnesses and their own forms of sadness and madness. This lead character specifically is a perfect example of why group therapy wouldn't actually work for everyone. She sits by herself in a corner. She tries not to make any eye contact. She doesn't speak to anyone. She doesn't breathe a word. She just sits there quietly. She knows that if she doesn't show up, she'll get in trouble. But she obviously doesn't want to be there. She doesn't want to talk about people's feelings or her feeling, or just or explain her forms of madness or why she has disabilities of her own. For hospitals, there's different types of mental health treatments that one can do. There's psychiatric hospitalization, so that's when someone is hospitalized and is getting psychiatric help while being hospitalized. There's also inpatient or residential mental health, so similar to CUT, where all the patients are living in the hospital. They are getting psychiatric help. There's also outpatient psychiatric help, where one goes to the hospital, one goes to a psychiatrist, but can still live at home depending on their situation. And then there's also medication. Now, not all of these work for everyone. There's different types for every single person. Some medication might not work. There's many people that have to go through multiple different types of medication, and same with psychiatrists. A lot of people have to go through multiple different types of psychiatrists to find the one that's right for them. Not all mental health hospitals or asylums are helpful. A long time ago, people actually struggled with it. They were overcrowded, there was never enough space for everyone, and they weren't treated properly. Especially at the beginning of the 19th century, when institutions were first presented, they were considered madhouses. They weren't properly treated. People that had mental illnesses weren't treated with respect or as people, which wasn't fair to anyone or to people with mental illnesses. Around the 20th century, psychiatric institutions started to grow increasingly, but they still had stories of overcrowded asylums, which were always repeated until today. They are still overcrowded, and not everyone is getting the help they need. Not only that, but it is incredibly difficult, even today, to find a psychiatrist or a doctor, or professional help for someone who has mental health issues or someone who is considered mad. In chapter 2, Callie, who is the main character and is only disclosed her name further on in the book, has recently self-harmed, and that is her way of dealing with her mental illness and her form of madness. And as of now, her disability and her mental illness is not said. However, she is someone who self-harms and in a way punishes herself because she thinks she deserves it, because she believes that things that happen in her life that may not always go the way people would want them to, she considers it her fault. Different people show different signs of madness. There are people who self-harm. There are people who binge or purge. There are people who shut others out. And there are other people who sometimes have manic or depressive episodes where they can just start crying for hours on end or not be able to get out of their bed. There are different signs of mental illness and madness throughout history that show when someone isn't right, and there's different signs nowadays that we can automatically identify when someone has suffered from a mental illness or is considered mad. Just like for an example, the self-harm symbol where it's the semicolon. It signifies someone who considers themselves mad, someone who is or was struggling and having a hard time and did or maybe not self-harm. And there are other forms as well. There are scars on some people occasionally, but there are also people who have trouble talking about it. Throughout this book, Callie, the lead character, describes other people who suffer from madness in different ways. And she describes some different types of mental illnesses in different forms, such as she considers people who suffer with bulimia, anorexia, body dysphorias, other things that have to do with body images and self-esteem as food issue guests. Those who suffer with eating or not eating or eating too much, or people who have no ability to keep anything down, that's what she considers food issue guests. And then there's those who Callie considers the substance abuse guests. Everyone in this hospital is not considered a patient. They are told that being a patient is someone who is suffering and is sick. They are called guests, visitors. They're not meant to feel as though they are imprisoned. So someone who is a substance abused or someone who takes a lot of drugs, Callie calls them substance abuse guests. Someone who suffers with madness and decides to cope with it with drug addiction or drug abuse, or someone who's just addicted to drugs, that's what they are considered. And then there are patients who self-harm. The lead character calls them cutters. There are people who turn to self-harm and a form of abuse to themselves when suffering from a mental illness or dealing with a type of madness. These different types of coping mechanisms, these different types of names are in fact different types of mental illnesses and different types of madness that people have to deal with every day. Nowadays, obviously, there's more. We have established more names, more forms of madness. There's anxiety, there's depression, there's bipolar personality disorder, there's bulimia, anorexia, body dysphoria. There are so many different types, and this book only covers a few, but it does outline how other people see them and how someone who is also dealing with madness is considering other people's mental illnesses and considering how they are who they are as people because of what they do. There are different types of mental illnesses. There's mood disorders, which is depression or bipolar. There are psychotic disorders, which is such as schizophrenia. There's eating disorders, which is anorexia, bulimia, which also includes binging and purging. There's substance abuse disorders, someone who takes too much of a certain substance and is addicted to it. That is also considered a mental disorder. There's trauma-related disorders, which is PTSD related, so from a certain type of trauma or something that happened in one's life that can in fact impact their mental health. There's anxiety disorders and personality disorders. I chose to talk about Cut specifically because when I was around 14, I got into this book, and it was one of those books that I was finally able to connect how I was feeling with someone who suffers from depression and severe anxiety when it comes to public stuff, going out in public or speaking in public or even doing something like what I'm doing right now. Those were always very difficult and still are for me to this day. And I found this assignment and this book very relatable because it is very difficult to find professional help. It is extremely difficult to get the right medication, and it's not easy to admit the fact that we need help, that I need help. And I had to go through multiple psychiatrists to find the right one. And when you have family members who don't agree, or people that don't agree with mental illness or mental health, it is very difficult to want to get help, and it's very difficult to come out and say, I am not okay, I am mad. And for someone who has suffered with a few different types of disorders, such as mentioned prior, it's not easy to go out and seek professional help, to go to a psychiatrist and wait over a year just to be able to find someone that you might not actually connect with, or you might not be able to talk to. It all depends on the person, and every single person needs different types of treatment and different types of help. A lot of my friends, in fact, do consider themselves mad, and they have so many problems with mental institutions and psychiatric help and medication, and it's constantly changing, but it's not progressing fast enough. The main point for this assignment was to kind of just shed the light on mental health issues and the fact that not everyone needs the exact same treatment. What I have may not be helpful for my friend, and then vice versa. And so reading this book when I was younger really showed me that as a young adult, when you're just realizing that you are not okay, you are not like other people, where you might see someone playing on the field and they're ecstatic, and you're not happy. You are not okay. You are mad. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's not a bad thing. But we are ingrained to think that it is not okay. We are ingrained to think that there's something wrong with us, which is why this book made such a big impact on me specifically, just because of the way it made me feel and realize that it's okay to be mad.